My name's Shilad Sen, and I'm a PhD candidate at the University of Minnesota. I'm doing research with the Group Lens Research Group, and my advisor is John Riedel. So I'm going to be talking today about some research that I conducted for my PhD dissertation that I'm working on. And I did this research with a bunch of collaborators. And one actually happens to be in the room now, so I'd like to recognize him, Dan Frankowski. He's with Google Groups, and he also used to work with me at Group Lens Research. And I also happen to be an intern with Google Checkout for the summer. So I titled this talk, Nurturing Tagging Communities. And one of the big questions I had when I started doing this line of research was, can we as system designers of tagging communities actually influence the tags people create in positive ways? Can we encourage them in a way that really is meaningful to create tags that are better for the community? And I think my title probably will tip my hat as to what I believe now. But that'll be a central topic of this talk. So if you're here, you probably know what tagging systems are all about, but just for the sake of being thorough. Here's an example. This is a photo from Flickr. It's a photo of a brick wall with some graffiti on it, and it was taken by Fire Monkey Fish. And Fire Monkey Fish decided to describe this entity, this photo, with some free-form words and phrases that we call tags. And he used tags like Los Angeles, guess where LA, tagging, which is how I found this particular photo. I did a search on Flickr for tagging, and at the time I created this talk, this was one of the highest return search results. I don't think it is right now, but so this is an example of an entity being tagged, and tagging has become very popular in the last 5 or so years, and it's good to talk about why it's popular. Why do people care about it? Well, there's a bunch of reasons, and here's an example that should illustrate some of them. This is a very cool website called librarything.com. Librarything.com allows users to catalog their personal collections of books. So librarything.com has a database. Users can go and say, I have these particular books, and then there'll be lots of information that's automatically stored about those books when they cross-reference to LibraryThing's database. So LibraryThing also allows users to tag the books in their library. And if I'm looking for a book, for example, a book on cooking, I can go to librarything.com and do a tag search for cooking. And here you can see what the search results page looks like for a tag search for cooking. There's a quintessential tag cloud on the right that shows the popularity of various related tags. And you can see I could drill down into some more refined searches besides just cooking. And then, most importantly, there's a list of the books that were tagged most often with the word cooking. And you can see the #1 result, Joy of Cooking, rightfully so, was tagged by 470 people with the word cooking. So this gives us a lot of examples of why tagging has become a powerful tool. First of all, tags scale very well. This website, which you may not have even heard of, has 17 million books that are tagged with over 20 million tags. And that has been done in just the 2 years since LibraryThing has been around. And you can compare that with the Library of Congress, who's been around for 200 years and has classified 20 million books in the time they've been around. So the other thing we can see in this example is that tagging systems draw relevance based on the wisdom of crowds. So while web pages, for example, use something like PageRank to draw on web page relevance, something that's very opaque for the end users, tagging systems use words that users apply to entities. So you get both relevance and popularity out of this single annotation. And it's also very transparent to the user. Right? When I see 470, I know 470 people have tagged that particular book. So that's another advantage of tagging systems. And thirdly, tagging systems help encourage social awareness. And this is a facet of tagging systems that's often overlooked by industry. And the idea here is I want to know that the pictures I'm looking at, the books I'm reading, the web pages I'm searching for are popular. I want to know that other people are looking at these same web pages. I want to feel like I'm part of a group. And tags help create this social awareness that makes this possible. So before I jump, oh yes. So there's skeptics of tags often cite reasons for not liking them, and there are reasons such as tags can be non-informational, they can be nonsensical, or they could even be malicious. They could be spam tags. So here's an example of Amazon.com's tags for this particular album by Paris Hilton. And you can see, although we get a sense for the fact that this album is bad, we don't get a lot of extra value, right, from these tags. So we could probably get all this information, maybe not the entertainment value, but we can get all this information from that star rating up there. So here's an example of why people don't like tags. And before I jump into the rest of my talk, I want to take a second to talk about the design dimensions we might think about when talking about or designing tagging systems. The first one that probably is most popular is whether tags themselves are kept public or private. So here's a website, Flickr, which you've seen an example of already. And here's a tag search for the tag tiger. And this is actually kind of a cool result page. Flickr groups together different senses of the same word tiger. So you can see results that have to do with tiger the animal, results that have to do with tiger the operating system, results that have to do with tiger the flower. So it's kind of a cool example. On the other end of the spectrum, Gmail has entirely private tags because your emails are private. So that's the other side. Another very important dimension of tagging systems are whether the items that are tagged are shared by users in the system or whether they belong to particular users. On the shared side, a website like last.fm is a website that presents information about music. It's kind of a social networking site built around music. So here's a particular track. It happened to be the most popular track when I looked at last.fm a few days ago, and it's a track called Farewell by the band Anastasia. And you can see it's been tagged with a lot of words like metal and progressive metal. And this track doesn't belong to anyone in the community, right? It's shared by all the members of the community. And you can contrast that with YouTube, where a particular user uploads a video and kind of owns that video. So another dimension that goes closely along with these two are whether the individual tags that people create are maintained separately for every person, such as in the last.fm site. If I tag this particular track metal, you can also tag it metal, and our tags are stored separately. They might be aggregated together, they might be both public, but the system itself stores them separately so that it can maintain statistics about them. On the other hand, a video on YouTube really only has one set of tags. So why am I interested in studying tagging? There's a couple reasons. First of all, it's very popular. It's kind of a ubiquitous Web 2.0 feature. But I think more importantly, tags are a form of community contribution. In fact, they're probably the simplest form of community contribution you can think of. When you think of community contribution sites, there's sites such as Wikipedia, Flickr, YouTube. These are some of the most popular sites on the internet these days. And tags capture a couple very important aspects of these community contributions. First of all, they're tremendously expressive. Second, they're very simple. So they're a very interesting vehicle for studying these community contributions. And with that in mind, there's a particular type of tagging systems that I'm interested in focusing on. I'm interested in focusing on tagging systems that have public tags because we want to see the interaction between users. And I'm interested in focusing on systems that maintain individual sets of tags, right? And the reason that I'm interested in those type of systems is we can get some idea for approval in these tags. We can get, from the aggregate statistics about multiple users tagging items, we can get information about agreement in a community. All right, so now I'm ready to jump into my talk. And here I'm going to just give you a brief overview for how it's going to be structured. So individual taggers in a system, in a tagging system, tag items, and those tags all come together to form a tagging vocabulary for the entire system. In the first half of the talk, we're going to look at how these vocabularies emerge. What are the things that make people tag the way that they do? And then if we understand what those things are, can we as system designers influence the tagging vocabulary in ways that are meaningful? And finally, if we know that we can influence the vocabulary in ways that are meaningful, can we make the vocabulary better? Do we understand what types of vocabularies have more or less value for the community? So those are the three questions in the first part of the talk. And in the second part of the talk, we'll look at one particular input, the tags that users see that actually turns out to be an important factor in the tags they themselves create. And if you believe that that is true, then it's in a system's best interest to display good tags, right? They want to display tags that are good to encourage the user, in turn, to use tags that are good. So in the second half of the talk, we'll look at tag selection methods that can differentiate between good and bad tags. So the first part of this talk is based on a paper I presented at CSCW 2006. You can find it online if you're interested in more of the details. I'm going to start by talking about 3 example vocabularies from 3 different tagging systems. This is the website Delicious. It allows users to tag web pages. And here you can see a particular user's vocabulary, Substa. Substa has used generally informational tags that are kind of keyword type tags. I think most of us would consider these tags to be good tags. And I'm going to call this type of vocabulary a factual vocabulary. All right, the second type of vocabulary we'll look at is from Amazon. Here's a user, John D. Collins from Amazon. Here's the tags John has created. And you can see John likes to describe how much he likes the books that he's read. And so this is an entirely different type of vocabulary. I'm going to call it a subjective vocabulary. It's based on John's opinions. And you might want to think about how valuable this is for the community as opposed to factual vocabulary, and how valuable it might be to the user who created the tags. And the last type of vocabulary is an example from a website that my research group maintains called Movie Lens. And here you can see this user has tagged movies with dates. And it turns out those dates are the dates that user saw the movie. So these tags are intended just for the user who created them. They aren't really intended for the community as a whole. So I'm going to call this type of vocabulary a personal vocabulary. And again, think about how valuable this is to the community and how valuable it is to the user who created those tags. OK, so I said we're going to talk about 3 questions. First, how do tagging vocabularies evolve? What makes people tag the way they do? Second, can we as system designers control vocabulary evolution? And third, are there specific types of vocabularies that are more or less valuable to the community? So in order to study vocabulary evolution, we introduced tagging to a website that we maintain called Movie Lens. Movie Lens is a movie recommendation website. Here you can see this user's #1 recommendation is 2001: A Space Odyssey. So users on Movie Lens rate movies and they receive movie recommendations. There's forums, so users have some form of social interaction. And we introduced tagging about 1.5 years ago. So tags show up on the search results page. Here you can see Forrest Gump has been tagged with Tom Hanks. Users can steal, we call it steal a tag as their own by clicking the little plus next to it. And we also suggest tags via Ajax autocomplete widget as users are entering tags for their own. So in order to study vocabulary evolution, we collected data when we first introduced tagging into the Movie Lens system for about a month. And during that month, users created 3,600 unique tags, unique words or phrases. And those tags were used in over 11,000 tag applications. So that the distinction between tag phrases and tag applications is important. A tag application is a tag phrase applied to a movie by a user. OK, and I'm going to return to those 3 classes of tags that I introduced in the beginning. We coded all the tags that showed up in Movie Lens during that first month. And here you can see a list of the top factual tags. And those accounted for about 64% of all the tag applications. And the subjective tags, here are the list of the top subjective tags, accounted for 22%. And finally, the personal tags were the smallest portion, 11% of all tag applications. All right, so what makes people tag the way they do? Well, there's a lot of things you can imagine. There's properties of the object being tagged. You know, if a car is fast, people might tag it with the word fast. But as a system designer, we can't really control the properties of the objects being tagged. Maybe we can control a couple other factors, though. And two factors we consider in our paper are investment and habit. The idea here is that users tag in ways that are similar to ways they've tagged in the past. And community influence. Users tag in ways that are similar to the ways they see other people tags. And here is a graph comparing these different types of factors. And I'm going to talk you through the graph. So the idea here is to look at the similarity between a particular tag that a user has applied and another group of tags. And when we talk about similarity, we're talking about similarity of tag classes. So if this is a factual tag that the user has applied, we look at the proportion of factual tags that this other group of tags has had in the past. So the very first line here, the blue line, is the similarity of a user's tag, a user's nth tag. So for example, their fifth tag to all the tags in the community as a whole up to that point in time. So if they've applied a factual tag, we see the proportion of factual tags the community has had in the past. The light green line is the similarity of a user's nth tag to the tags the user has seen in the past. So this is a pretty interesting difference here. It shows us that the tags a user creates are more similar to the tags they have viewed than the tags in the community as a whole. Right? So clearly, community influence does play some role in the tags a user creates. And finally, the top red line, the strongest correlation, is the similarity between a tag a user has applied and the tags they've applied in the past. So users seem to tag similarly to how they've tagged in the past. All right, so we've seen that users care about the tags they see in the community, that they're influenced by what they see. Now, can we use this community influence to control vocabulary evolution? And to study this, when we introduced tagging features into Movie Lens, we split users into 4 groups. And each group's tags were maintained separately, and we used different tag selection algorithms for each of these groups. And the tag selection algorithms decided which tags each group was shown, which community tags. So this tag selection algorithm showed itself in a couple places in the interface. In the search results, it shows the community tags that were displayed. And in the movie details page, it shows the community tags that were displayed. And it also shows the tags that were displayed in the autocomplete dropdown. So let me describe the 4 different groups. The first group we called unshared. And in this group, users did not see other users' tags. So 3 different users, these are actual real examples from our website, applied 3 different tags to the movie Pulp Fiction, and none of the users saw each other's tags. The second group is called the shared group. And in the shared group, all the tags by all users in the group for the movie Pulp Fiction get grouped together, and then we randomly pick a selection of tags to show the user. And the third group is the shared pop group. Now, this is just like the shared group, but instead of randomly picking tags, we pick the most popular tags in the group. And finally, the most radical of the 4 groups was the shared rec group. And this was an idea to try to bootstrap tags. So we looked at movies that had been rated similarly. Here, Pulp Fiction, Fight Club, Reservoir Dogs, and The Godfather had all been rated similarly by Movie Lens users. We grouped the tags together for all those movies, and we returned the most popular tags from the whole set. So what did we find? Well, we found that the vocabularies that emerged were very different. And the way we measured different was we looked at the tag class distributions over time for each of the groups. All right? So we can see in the unshared group, the tag class proportions are relatively similar. The shared group is dominated by subjective tags, and the shared pop and shared rec group are dominated by factual tags. So this is a pretty surprising result. We have 4 groups. They have very similar tagging interfaces, and the vocabularies that evolve in each of those 4 groups are entirely different. We weren't able to run this experiment many times. We don't have a large enough user base, so we can't be sure that these results are deterministic. We can't be sure that it's actually the different interfaces that are responsible for the differences. But anecdotally, we believe there's evidence for this. And the reason is as follows. The shared pop and shared rec group preferred to show users tags that were popular. Now, it turns out that factual tags are generally applied by more users and more times than other types of tags. So it's very likely that the shared pop and shared rec group showed more factual tags, and in turn, users decided to tag in more factual ways. And similarly, the unshared group didn't show any community tags. So if I'm a tagger and I'm creating tags that I don't think are going to be shown to the rest of the community, I'm probably only interested in tagging for myself. And so the number of personal tags is much higher in the unshared group. So there's pretty strong anecdotal evidence for these different tag interfaces affecting the different vocabularies.
Is the x-axis the number of tags in total that were applied to these groups?
The x-axis is the number of tags in total. So there is different overall number of tags for each group. We didn't actually find that difference was statistically significant. So, for example, there's a few users who might apply a lot of tags. One thing we did do was retake this graph with the normalizing each user. So enforcing that power users and a normal user who has just applied 5 tags have the same amount of influence over this graph, and we found the same result. So it's not just a few users who are skewing this whole distribution. This is really a broad, robust difference between groups. All right, so we've seen that users are influenced by the tags they see. We've seen that different types of vocabularies can evolve, and now we want to know whether different types of vocabularies have different values. So the way we did this was by asking users a survey about particular tag applications. So we asked them a bunch of questions about the tag phone booth for the Matrix, for example. And I'm going to summarize the results for each of our... Oh, I skipped one. Did I miss a slide? There it is. All right. I'm going to summarize the results for each of our 3 tag classes. And here's the results for the factual tag class. I'll let you read this quote. So most users agreed. Factual tags were generally liked. 56% of factual tags were deemed displayable by users, and users found them useful for learning about movies and for finding movies. So the second group is subjective tags, and here are 2 different quotes about the tag surreal for eternal sunshine of the spotless mind. I'll let you read them. So the funny thing about subjective tags is users liked subjective tags if they agreed with them. They didn't like subjective tags if they didn't agree with them. And that's kind of reflected in these 2 quotations. Subjective tags were in general less useful, but users who created the subjective tags found them very useful for expressing their own opinions. So they liked applying subjective tags even if the other people in the community didn't get as much value from them. All right, here's the last class of tags, personal tags. I'll let you read this quote. How does it help a single other person on the planet? I mean, this user really didn't like this particular tag. And he wasn't alone. This sentiment was shared by many other users. Only 17% of users thought personal tags were helpful. But again, we see this imbalance between the value to the community and the value to the tag creator. Users thought that personal tags were very valuable in organizing their own lists. So this hints at a design recommendation. Tagging systems should have optional private tags so that users who want to create personal tags can do so because it's valuable to them, but they can be hidden from the rest of the community. OK, so now I'm going to move on to the second half of my talk. So in the first half of the talk, we looked at how different tagging vocabularies emerged. We saw users are influenced by the tags they see. And we saw that different types of vocabularies can have different value. So it makes sense that in order to encourage users to tag in ways that are good, we want to show them tags that are good, right? They're influenced by what they see. So in this half of the talk, I'm going to talk about a paper that I'll be presenting at Group 2007. So how can a system determine what tags are good? Well, there's tons of ways, but we focus on a few very simple ones in this paper. We just talked about how different tag classes have different tag value, have different value to the community. So we could use that. Unfortunately, we found it fairly difficult to infer what class a particular tag is. And even for the most well-liked tag class, factual tags, only 56% of those tags were deemed viewable. So we hope that we can have a better signal. So we looked at two other types of signals for determining tag quality. And that's implicit behavioral data, things like clicks, searches, the number of applications a tag has, and explicit ratings data in the form of thumbs up and down widgets. And in order to evaluate tag quality, we collected some survey data. We collected 75,000 survey responses about tag applications where we asked users to rate tags on a 1 to 5 scale. We told them tags rated 3, 4, or 5 would be displayed in Movie Lens. So that's 3 is kind of the threshold for displayable. And one thing we found in Movie Lens that may not be true in other communities are most of the tags in Movie Lens are actually not very good. Only 38% of the tags in Movie Lens were displayable, and the mean rating was only 2. So let's look at how some of the implicit measures fared. The first implicit measure is that we might want to consider are the number of applications a tag has had. It makes sense that if that users apply good tags more often. That seems reasonable. So it turns out that isn't the case. Only 39. So if you rank all the tags in the survey by the number of applications they've had, so the most applied tags are over here on the left, and you take the top 25%, the top quartile, and you look at the number of the percent of the survey responses in that top quartile that users actually wanted to see. We're going to call that the precision of the top quartile. So the precision of the top quartile was only 39%. I mean, and that's barely above the average across all survey responses of 38%. So not very good. And it turns out the reason that is happening is because the most applied tags are generally personal. So 4 of the 5 top most applied tags are DVD, own, seen at the cinema, Eric DVDs. So users apply these personal tags. A few users apply these personal tags many, many times. So how can we combat these personal tags? Well, one thing we can do is normalize each user's influence. And the easiest way to normalize each user's influence is to look at the number of users who have applied each of these tags. And actually, that does much better. So again, if you rank all the survey responses by the number of users who have applied a tag, you take the top quartile, 52% of those tags in the top quartile were deemed displayable. So not great, but a lot better than number of applications. Another thing we looked at was the number of searches for a tag. Turns out that if you just look at the raw number of searches, it has the same problem. A few very power users skew the results. But if you normalize by user and you look at the number of users who search for a tag, it does much better. It does particularly well on the high end. for the top 1 or 2%, I think it was up at 80% precision. So what can we take from these implicit measures? Well, one thing is that you should select implicit measures that normalize the ability of particular users to influence your metrics. So we don't want a few power users skewing the results for all the rest of the users. So we also looked at explicit measures based on tag ratings for determining tag quality. And here you can see the interface we used. We just stuck a little thumbs up, thumbs down widget near each of the tags. If a user would rate a tag thumbs up, it would slide to the front of their list. If they rated it thumbs down, it would fall off their list. I'm going to skip this slide. So here's what we found about what we can infer from a user's own ratings for a particular tag. So if we take the most naive reading of a tag rating, so if I rate the tag phone booth for the matrix, if we just take that as meaning that I don't like that particular application of that tag, we get a very high precision rate, 81%. Unfortunately, any particular user has not rated very many tags, so the coverage of that algorithm is very low. Only 0.5% of the survey responses were associated with a particular tag rating. On the other hand, we could take a little bit broader reading of a tag rating. We could say, if I rate the tag phone booth for the movie The Matrix, that might tell me something about how I like the tag phone booth in general. So that had a relatively similar precision, 75%, so just slightly lower. But it had 4 times higher coverage. Still not very good, but much better than user rating. So we have 2 design recommendations that will come from this. First, systems should assume that users are going to rate tags consistently, because that's generally what we found. We found that users overall rated tags very consistently. But they don't always rate them consistently. So you should have some way for users to rate tags, different applications of the same tag, differently. All right, so we can probably be smarter about the way we interpret tag ratings. We could look at how the community as a whole feels about particular tags. So to do that, we'll look at the global average for different tag ratings. And here's a graph that compares global average with the other tag selection algorithms we've seen. So on the y-axis, we have the precision of the survey results, the percent of the survey results that users said they wanted to see. On the x-axis, again, we ranked all the tags using each tag selection algorithm, and we cut off at various points, the top 12%, the top 25%, the top 37%. So here you can see, first of all, that user average and user rating do very well, but have very low coverage, so they can't even handle the top 12%. But more interestingly, global average barely does as well as the best implicit measure. So the number of users who have applied a tag is as powerful a predictor as global average. So this is pretty surprising to me. I actually expected explicit tag rating feedback to be much stronger than this. So why aren't ratings more powerful?
Just to clarify, you're talking about the thumbs up, thumbs down rating of tags?
Yes.
As a metric for precision? Or kind of?
Yeah, so this is looking at how well thumbs up, thumbs down ratings predicted survey results. So we have.
So then you'd survey as to what's this tag useful?
Yeah.
Or not?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Right, and so.
And was that always, how useful is this tag to the community, or how useful would this tag be to you?
I think the way we phrased that question was, would you want to see this tag on this movie? So, and I don't think we differentiated between tag creators and the community as a whole. All right, so why aren't average user ratings more powerful as a selection method? Well, it turns out users don't agree about how how good tags are, but they don't agree in kind of interesting ways. They agree about bad tags. So if the first 3 times a tag has been rated are all negative ratings, if the first 3 ratings are all negative ratings, then 90% of the resulting ratings for that tag are going to be negative. So this is a pretty easy metric that systems can implement, and it seems fairly accurate. And you can slide the knob up. I think if you go and look at the first 5 ratings, it goes up to 99% or something like that. So on the other hand, users don't agree about good tags. So if you look at the first 3 users who rated a particular tag, and they're all positive, only 50% of the remaining ratings will be positive. So users really didn't agree about what tags were good. They just agreed about what tags were bad. And as an example, here's a tag based on a book. The first 9 users who rated this tag all rated it positively. In fact, many of those users rated it several times. So 16 positive ratings for this tag, right? We have a lot of data about it. So we should assume that this tag is good. Well, it turns out that not everyone agreed. Only 65% of the remaining 37 ratings were positive. So this might be domain specific. Movie Lens has fairly poor tags overall. Only 38% of our tags were deemed displayable. So it might be domain specific, but still, it's an interesting result. Here's an example, another example about how users don't agree. So here's a list of the most controversial tags in Movie Lens. And controversial is measured by kind of a Bayesian form of entropy that weights tags with very few ratings lower. So we look with tags with a relative even up and down rating. And you can see the tags on this list fall into a few categories. First, many of them are subjective. Tags like stylized, quirky, classic. These are subjective tags. Some of them are redundant. So Movie Lens displays information about a movie, and tags like animation, Steven Spielberg, and sci-fi already appear in the interface. And the third class of tags are tags that are inherently controversial. And this is a tag like the nudity tag, nudity full frontal. And so I'm going to use this as a launching off point for a very interesting story. And this is to look at the evolution of nudity tags in Movie Lens. So Movie Lens doesn't have any adult movies, first of all, just to preserve Movie Lens's integrity. So here's a graph. It shows the number of times nudity tags were applied on the left, and the number of users who applied them on the right. And the x-axis is the number of days since the first nudity tag was introduced. So these are all the tags that have the word nudity or nude in them. And I'm going to kind of just tell the story about how this vocabulary evolved. So the first nudity tag was the tag nudity, right? That's a natural tag for a movie with nudity, and it's for this movie Havoc, which I don't know. So about a month later, there is the second nudity tag, which is my favorite of all the nudity tags. When you're stressed out, nudity works wonders for your nerves. So this is not a lot of informational content, but some entertainment content. That was a tag. Yeah. Amazing. I don't think they had the comma in there because that would be shown as 2 tags. But, and then another month later or so, we really start to see the real nudity vocabulary emerging. So a single user applies the tag notable nudity, and 3 other users use that same tag in 3 days. Now that's an interesting choice of vocabulary, right? If you're going to describe a movie with nudity, and you ask 2 random strangers, and they don't have any communication, they probably won't both say, oh, notable nudity. So clearly there's some community influence going on. In fact, that tag, notable nudity, was used by 20 different users over the next 3 months. So now we're going to jump to this big spike in the graph. one particular power adult annotator, a few months later, at 1 in the morning, decided to tag 300 different times with different versions of nudity tags. And this particular user was not satisfied with notable nudity, right? He or she wanted a much more refined set of categories for nudity. So here you can see what their categories were. And they ended up creating 800 tags, nearly 800 nudity tags over a span of about a few weeks, I think. So this is all interesting. I mean, this is a very good, it seems like a reasonable classification for nudity. Well, the movie lens community also thought so. So if you remember, there was about 30 applications of notable nudity down here. But after the adult annotator's vocabulary, the movie lens community entirely switched. So that tag, notable nudity, was only used 3 times during the whole rest of the nudity tag's evolution. And on the other hand, the adult annotator's vocabulary was used very, very frequently. It was used by 71 users 173 different times. So the movie lens community really grabbed onto this vocabulary. So it's interesting, the vocabulary came along here and it changed midstream, right? So it really shows the power of community influence in a vocabulary. So another interesting side note is nudity tags are very popular in movie lens. In fact, 4 of the top 10 most popular tag searches are these 8 nudity tags. All right, so we talked about ratings and how users don't agree on ratings. So the last thing I want to look at is whether ratings are helpful. So it didn't look like it, right? Num users, this implicit metric, did just as well as global average. But if the type of tags that num users and global average are good at predicting are different, then we can get value from combining them. So what we did is we formed a hybrid method that basically averaged the responses from all the different tag selection methods, both explicit and implicit. And what we found is that the overall precision was 5% higher. So rating tags actually did add extra value in terms of precision. So 5%, right? What does that matter? Is that worth the extra effort that users have to expend to get 5%? Well, the answer is yes, because even if it was 0%, people would still do it. People like to rate tags. They really enjoyed it. So it shouldn't be considered work, at least in movie lens. And lastly, there's a few open questions related to determining tag quality. First of all, if you have a high traffic site, it could be that implicit measures could do a lot better. If your ratio of good to bad tags is different than it is in movie lens, you might be able to do better. And lastly, the tag selection algorithms we focused on were really intuitive, easy to implement algorithms. And you can imagine doing much more complex machine learning techniques. OK, so that's my talk. I'm going to just summarize what we talked about. We talked about vocabulary evolution. We saw that users are influenced by the tags they see. We saw that vocabulary evolution is pretty volatile. Quite different vocabularies can emerge. And we saw that vocabularies have different value. So it's important for designers to be careful about vocabulary evolution. And then in the second half of the talk, we looked at how systems can choose good tags to show users. We looked at some implicit measures of tag selection. And we looked at measures that were fairly successful that normalize the influence of power users so that particular users can't skew results. And finally, we saw that if we use hybrid schemes that are based on ratings and implicit information, they do better than any one particular tag selection algorithm could do. So thanks to my advisor, John Riedel, co-authors, including Dan, the rest of GroupLens, NSF for paying me, and Google for hosting the talk. Thanks, and I'll take questions. So let's start out there in the back. I have a microphone, but maybe I'll just let you talk and I'll repeat your question.
Probably video taking it. So, yeah.
Here you go.
So I assume people who tag know something about the information they're looking at so that they can tag. So they know that a movie is fictional, and so they tag it fictional. So if they already know the information about which they're tagging, what's the impetus? What drives them to tag?
Mm-hmm. That's a great question. And we asked that question in our first survey that we asked Movie Lens users. So it turns out that the people who tagged were kind of evenly divided in the reasons they tagged. I think a lot of people tagged to express themselves, just because they like to express their opinions about the movie. Those probably resulted in subjective tags. A lot of people tagged because they felt like they were part of the Movie Lens community and they just wanted to give back. And then some people tagged to organize their movies. So those were the top 3 survey responses. And if I remember correctly, they were kind of evenly divided. Okay.
So on your entropy slide,
Uh-huh.
A lot of the tags you showed with a lot of entropy were very subjective.
Yeah.
And I find it very surprising that you also had quite a lot of entropy on somewhat factual stuff, including nudity, sci-fi animation, Steven Spielberg. Is there any way, were you guys able to find any way to separate the difference between showing just a quality of a tag in its application versus whether or not the user cared to see it, be it redundant or they just don't want the word nudity showing up all over the website?
Right. So we don't have any data on why users don't like the tags that they don't like, except that we have some anecdotal information based on survey responses. It would be interesting, at least to run an experiment, where you had different ways of panning a tag. You can pan it because it's good. Pan it because it's subjective or because it's redundant, or something like that. Sorry? Like slash dot, right? Right. Different reasons for moderation. Because maybe you're right. Maybe you can do a better job of detecting specific cases of bad tags than trying to detect the umbrella of bad tags. Yeah. Other questions?
I guess, like, what percentage of the community participated, or did you find adding this feature, more people signed up or used it more, or what else?
So the question was, what percentage of the community use tagging, and did people like it in general? Did it encourage overall usage? I believe, so are you talking about tag ratings or tagging in general? So I think about 12% so there's a portion of my paper I didn't talk about here. There's different experimental groups with different rating interfaces. In the most active rating interface, 12%, I believe, of the people in the community rated a tag. And I think the percentage of taggers overall is something like 7%. So one interesting thing we found, these tags actually take up a lot of real estate on Movie Lens. So we found that people who had been using the system for a long time before tags were introduced often didn't like tags. They thought they just didn't want things to change. They wanted them to stay the way they were. So we actually had to introduce a hide all tags button. And I think that was probably used by, like 0.25% of the total users. But I don't know if we saw any overall changes in usage behavior. I'm not sure about the data on that. More questions?
Could you tell us a bit about where the decision to use MovieLand came from, as opposed to using, this has been hosted entirely by your research project, I guess. So was it much easier to do that and have something of an artificial maybe site, or is it apparent to users that the research is going on behind the site, as opposed to using some site like Delicious and getting data from that? Is that a difficult thing to do?
It was difficult for us because we wanted to do experimental manipulations. So we would have to make changes to Delicious, which is not easy for a research group to do. The Movie Lens users, so Movie Lens is actually a site that exists outside of these experiments being run, I guess, but users do know that they're ongoing. So in the discussion forums, they often talk about being guinea pigs, but they seem happy to be guinea pigs. So. Any more questions? Does New York have a question?
Well, I'm trying to think of one, because I do have a couple kind of almost questions. You talked about the display of the tags influencing the tags that get applied. Did you try out different ways to display the tags?
Yeah, so we didn't change the fundamental tag display widget between groups. So that's another area of research that could be really interesting. We didn't look at things like differences between tag clouds and other ways of navigating the tag space. We did look at, like I said, we did look at how choosing different tags to display matters.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I couldn't see the screen, so I couldn't tell.
OK. Yeah, so the differences were mostly in the tags that were shown to users, not in the widget that displayed the tags.
That's how they were displayed.
Yeah.
Okay.
Did you have another question?
No, not right now.
OK. OK, there's a question over here. Chum?
So you mentioned that only about 7% of the community were actively tagging. And I think you also mentioned that tag application didn't really seem to change how people used the site.
Mm-hmm.
So in your opinion, what do you think is the value in tagging then?
Right. So I think users get informational value from tagging. They get search value from tagging. So tag searches are, next to title search, is the most popular search in Movie Lens. So they're actually, so Movie Lens has a small support staff. We can't enter all this information in movies that users want. And tags are a way for the community to do that in a way that's scalable. So it turns out that these tag searches are actually valuable to the community. And I think the other reasons that tags are valuable are they're just fun. People like to do them. They're a way of for community members to express themselves. All right, we have a whole bunch of questions. How about over here, Lily?
So you're talking about, during the talk I kind of got the sense that objective tags seem like the ones that would be the most helpful to the community. Mm-hmm. But you also say a reason to do tagging is because people find it fun, and those people tend to be the ones who do subjective tagging. Yeah. How do you think about that in the design of these sorts of systems?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I can imagine, so I think that's a contradiction that you'll always have. I can also imagine that if you had selection algorithms that were smart enough, maybe they could look at, one of the things I said is users like to see subjective tags they agree with. And you can imagine trying to decide what subjective tags a user would agree with and trying to show them those particular tags.
Yeah, recommend subjective tags.
Right. So that would be a cool application. On the other hand, I think you're right. It's a tough balance.
All right. I think I heard recently that there was a new search website based on tagging that was started by one of the people involved in Wikipedia, like just for sort of trying to tag the internet as a whole. Huh. So I was wondering if you thought like tagging could be like scaled to being able to actually successfully tag the internet as a whole, and how you think the search quality of that tagging-based search engine would compare to, say, Google.
Right. So an example of such a site would be Delicious, right? Delicious tags web pages. It scales. It doesn't look like Delicious motivates users to tag as much as a site like Flickr or Wikipedia, or even like Library Thing for that matter. But the one thing that Delicious does give you is the wisdom of crowds measure of relevance. So if I get search results on Delicious, I know those search results are there because users found that word relevant to that site, right? And that's very, very opaque. Very transparent. It's very clear why they did that. So I think that's a very powerful feature of tag search that PageRank, for example, doesn't give you. Now, whether or not a site like Delicious can scale to the entire internet, I don't know. That's a big question. Any more questions?
Yeah, I have another one. Did you think about tagging objects based on user behavior rather than on explicit, like, I want to tag this? I mean, did you ever consider sort of interpreting user behavior and tagging things accordingly?
So like if I search for a particular item and click on it, then infer that the tag would.
Yeah.
No, we didn't do that. We did the one. We did try to bootstrap the one tagging metric that was based on similarly rated movies. So we looked at movies with similar ratings, and then we grouped together tags. It turns out users really, really didn't like that particular approach. So you would get all these really nonsensical tags. I suppose if, like the example I gave about searching for a tag and then clicking on something, that might be a reasonable approach to try. I think you'd have to be pretty accurate with your implicit metrics.
Yeah, because I think that's the main problem with tagging, is that you have to make tags and then apply tags. If you could figure out a good way to sort of tag things in as a side effect of doing what you want to do. You know what I mean? Like, oh, it just happened to tag it that way because I did what I wanted to do.
Right.
It seems like that would be the ideal situation, because there'd be no extra effort for the user.
Right.
I don't know how to do that.
So a lot of applications actually try to do a little bit of what you're saying, right? Delicious, for example, it's a bookmark management tool, and they just happen to have tags fall out of bookmark management. So users tag things because they want to be able to find them later, presumably.
Right.
Not because they want to share their tags with other users as much. I actually don't think that's entirely the case, but what you're saying, I think, is good. Any more questions? All right, thank you very much.